The mount took 40 seconds to find Polaris, 40 more to settle into tracking, and then it was quiet, the kind of quiet that had a hum underneath it, a 12-volt reminder that something was working. Martin set the timer on his phone and sat down in the folding chair he'd brought out because the one the wife had wanted on the deck was too low for the eyepiece. The backyard was 14 by 22 feet of Bermuda grass with a patch of dead zoysia he'd been meaning to fix since September. The neighbor's oleanders pressed the fence on two sides. Beyond them, nothing. The star he was watching was invisible to the eye, a point of light like every other point of light, magnitude 11.2, sitting in a field of fainter points he could just make out through the finder's crosshairs. He opened the laptop. The camera showed a patch of sky the size of his thumbnail, peppered with stars. The target at the center held tight by the autoguider. He checked the histogram, selected the comparison star, set the aperture and annulus. The software stored the star's brightness. Then the next one, and the next. The light curve was a flat line. That was the point, a flat line that meant nothing was passing. And then, in a few hours, a shallow dip. About 3%, a planet blocking some of the light from a star he could not see, 312 light-years away. He adjusted the focus. Once, unnecessarily. The Batonov mask was still on, its diffraction spikes splaying the bright star into a cross that told him nothing except that the optics were aligned. He removed the mask, folded it, and set it on the table beside the thermos. The thermos held coffee he'd made at 9 o'clock. It was now just past 11. He unscrewed the lid, poured a cup, and found it barely warm. This was the third thermos in a year. The others had held tea, and both had eventually failed. He drank it anyway. The cup was one of the 4 from a set the wife had bought at a crafts fair in Cloudland, each one slightly wrong. This one had a hairline crack he kept meaning to glue and never did, and the glaze was a blue that didn't match anything in the kitchen. At 23:47, the first frame showed the target star at Tumbran 99 counts, comparison at 22:47. The next frame, 1098. The next, 1100. The scatter was tight, better than most nights from the backyard. He watched the numbers and felt the small satisfaction of a system behaving. The mount hummed. A dog barked somewhere beyond the oleanders, then stopped. The laptop fan cycled on, then off. The light curve remained flat. It would stay flat for another 2 hours. He knew this. He had downloaded the ephemeris 3 weeks ago and calculated the window, ingress at 0142, mid-transit at 0317, egress at 0452. He had set the alarm, filled the thermos, checked the dew heater, aligned the scope at dusk. He had done everything right. This was the waiting, the chair, the cooling coffee, the stars turning above the zoysia, the knowledge that something was happening far away that he could not see but could, if he was patient and the equipment held measure. He adjusted the exposure time from 30 seconds to 25, then back to 30. The histogram changed by nothing. He was doing this because he was nervous, and he knew he was doing it, and he did it anyway. The focuser had a tactile bump every half millimeter. His fingers knew it. He had focused on this star 40 times in the last month, adjusting for temperature drift, and his hand found the position now without thinking. The adjustment was not necessary. He did it anyway. Through the kitchen window, he could see the light on. The wife was in there, or had been. The motion sensor had tripped at 22:03, and not again. She was probably asleep. She worked mornings. She had told him once, early in this, that she didn't mind the light in the backyard as long as it didn't keep her up, and he had said it wouldn't, and it hadn't. They had an arrangement. He kept the laptop brightness at minimum. He used the red headlamp. He came inside before dawn so she didn't have to step out into the dew and find him gone. At 00:15, a neighbor's motion light came on across the property line. A deer, probably, or a cat. And one frame showed elevated scatter in the comparison star. He flagged it in the notes. Possible obstruction, frame 142, 00:15:32. The next frame was clean. He noted that too. The house was quiet. The street light at the corner, the one he'd complained to the HOA about twice and lost both times, threw a faint orange glow over the back fence. He'd learned to work around it. The light curve had a systematic offset that was consistent and therefore ignorable. The scatter it added was small. The fact that it existed at all was the kind of thing that would make a professional astronomer wince and an amateur astronomer shrug and keep going. At 01:17, he stood up and stretched. His lower back ached. He walked to the fence and looked up. The stars were thick and undifferentiated, the Milky Way a faint smudge above the oleanders. He could not find the target star by eye. He knew it was there. He had tracked it. He had imaged it. He had measured its brightness 100 times in the last month. But it was invisible. It had always been invisible. Even the finder scope showed it as a ghost. The camera showed it as a number. The only thing that was visible was the graph, and the graph was still flat. He went back to the chair. He poured more coffee. It was cold now, completely cold, and he drank it anyway because the thermos was the thermos and the cup was the cup, and the night was the night. He made a note in the log. 01:17, stretched. Conditions nominal. At 01:39, the light curve moved. Not much, 0.1%. The drop was so shallow he might have called it noise, and in the first minute he did. He checked the histogram. Still clean. He checked the autoguider star. Still locked. He checked the comparison. Still steady. He watched the next frame arrive. 187. Down from +99. The frame after that. 179. He did not feel what he expected to feel. He had expected. He wasn't sure. A spike. A moment of confirmation. Something cinematic. What he felt was the room narrowing around the numbers until the mounts hum, the dew on the grass. The cracked cup in his hand all seemed to take their rhythm from the slight downward slope on the screen. The dip was real. The data said so. He had done everything right, and the data said so. And the planet was there. Not visible. Not in any way he could point to, but there. Blocking a fraction of the light from a star that would not know it had been seen for another 312 years. He checked the timestamp. 01:41. The ephemeris said 01:42. 1 minute early. He noted it. Ingress observed 01:41:03. Predicted 01:42:10. Delta 67. The early ingress was not significant. It was within the error bar. It was the kind of thing that happened and did not matter. But it was his. He had measured it. It was in the log. Through the kitchen window, the light was off now. He could see the counter in the dim glow from the backyard. The coffee maker, the magnetic strip with the knives they never used, the hook where she kept her keys. The house was dark and ordinary and exactly where it should be. He watched the dip deepen. Frame by frame, the star got fainter. Not dramatically. From 1099 to 1076 over 20 minutes was a change no one would notice looking at the image. But the graph showed it. A shallow V-shape, the bottom at mid-transit, the slope gentle and precise and exactly what the math said it would be. He had been doing this for 2 years, and he still could not quite believe that the math worked. That you could point a telescope at a star you couldn't see and a camera at a spot in the sky and a laptop at a piece of software, and end up with a curve that matched the predictions of people with access to space telescopes and professional budgets, and the comfortable confidence of institutions. At 02:18, the kitchen light came on, then off, then on again. She was up, probably getting water. He heard the tap run faintly through the wall. Then nothing. Then, at the back door, the sound of the deadbolt turning. She opened it just far enough to stick her head out. Claire, he thought of her by name only at the door, never in the yard, was wearing the old gray shirt she slept in, the one with the cracked print, and her hair was pressed flat on one side. "You still out here?" she said. Not a question. "Still out here. It's late. It's early. Come look." She came out onto the deck in bare feet and stood at the top of the 3 steps that led down to the grass. She did not come closer. He had learned not to ask. She looked at the scope, the laptop, the graph on the screen. "Is that it?" she said. "The thing?" "The thing. It's dropping now. Should hit the bottom in about an hour." She stood there for a moment, her arms folded against the cold. The night was not cold. It was mid-May, low 60s. But she was not built for the pre-dawn chill, and she knew it. She looked at the graph, then at him, then at the sky. "I don't see how you do this," she said. "I look up and it's just more." He didn't answer. She shook her head and went back inside. The deadbolt clicked. The kitchen light went off. The house settled into the kind of silence that had someone in it. The creak of a stair, the shift of weight on a mattress, the small ordinary sounds of a person going back to sleep in a room he could not see from the yard. He watched the curve flatten at the bottom, mid-transit. The planet was directly between his camera and the star, blocking the maximum amount of light. 1 second 68 counts, down from 1099. A 2.8% dip. It was small. It was enormous. A planet orbiting a star he could not see, and he had measured it in a backyard with a 14 by 22-foot patch of Bermuda grass and a thermos that could not keep coffee warm. The minutes passed. The curve began to rise. He logged each frame, each timestamp, each count. The scatter was low. The night was holding. The mount tracked. The autoguider held. The coffee in the thermos was irrelevant now. He had stopped checking it, stopped drinking it. It was a thing that had failed him, and he had moved past it, the way you move past a dead battery or a fouled cable. At 04:52, the egress appeared. 179, then 1087, then 1095. The graph climbed back toward the baseline. He watched it rise and felt the strange, quiet satisfaction of a thing ending the way it was supposed to. Not dramatically, not with relief, but with the simple, boring evidence that he had been there, that he had watched, that the data was clean. He saved the final log. He closed the software. He powered down the camera, the autoguider, the mount. The scope settled into its home position, the motors going quiet one by one, the whole apparatus returning to the state it held in daylight. Inert, ordinary, indistinguishable from a piece of yard equipment. He left the Batinov mask on the table. He folded the chair. He carried the laptop inside and set it on the kitchen counter, next to the magnetic strip with the knives and the hook where she kept her keys. The house was dark. He could hear her breathing. In the morning, he would reduce the data, detrend for air mass, plot the final curve, compare it to the ephemeris. He would do this at the table with the coffee she made and the light through the window above the sink. But for now, he stood in the dark and looked at the backyard, at the scope on its tripod, at the table with the thermos and the mask. He had adjusted the focus once, unnecessarily, at the beginning of the night. His fingers still remembered the tactile bump, the half-millimeter position that was exactly right for this temperature, this star, this night.